Hang on. Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of Business and Life Stories with Mike and James. Today we have a really special guest. As you all know, James lives in Wanaka, New Zealand, which for most of us looks like the place in the Hobbit movies. And we always wonder, how does James get to live in this cool place? And he's told us the story how he got there. And today's one of his neighbors, Randy Richards, runs a super cool retreat and a website and a center. And I'm not going to give away any more than that. So take it away, James.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you kindly, Mike. Randall, welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, James. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for the opportunity.
So you've got quite a story, so I'd love to jump in. So I'd love to hear about your sort of early days, because one of the many things you are, one of the many attributes and certifications is you're a qualified ski guide, qualified mountain guide, qualified skipper, and everything, and all the skills and certifications attached to all of those. So how did you go from—
Let me interrupt a little bit. I've been teaching ski. Let me just interrupt a little bit. Been skiing, teaching skiing since I was 14, and I've been a professional member of the American Mountain Guides Association. Never went through the whole to get jobs with Alpine Ascents International, that sort of thing. There's plenty of guiding jobs. Now they've tightened it up quite a bit. So maybe I'll get grandfathered in someday. Go ahead.
You sort of got your youthful stories about how you went from Randall the youth into Randall the guide and experienced skier and mountaineer and skipper.
Yeah. Well, I was heavily in the ski business. As I said, I started teaching when I was 14, teaching adults, and then went to University of Utah because I wanted to major in skiing, and there was a joke, University of Snowbird. We had actually have T-shirts. But no, I was into ski boot manufacturing. I had a real passion for boots and boot fitting and the manufacturing process, and so I got rep jobs even in university at college. With Hansen ski boots. I really liked the thing. And this guy says, this friend of mine, a family friend from New Hampshire, says, Randy, he was Austrian or German. He says, Randy, when you graduate from university, we get you a job in Austria making ski boots. And I go, yeah, right. But sure enough, I was on a plane right after graduation. I was over in Lech, Austria, working for Strolz ski boots, and Martin Strolz took me under his wing. And so I worked for him as a master bootmaker trainee. So, and also just as a salesperson on the shop. And I said, do I need to learn any German before I get? I'll speak English, Well, that wasn't the case. They did speak English, but they didn't want some crazy American in the shop. They were on holiday, these Germans, and they wanted service right away. So, I was in the ski business, and there was one day I was looking out the window in the boot shop during the summer months, and I looked out at the Alps and I go, there's something wrong with this picture. I'm in here working on these boots. I want to be out there. So that's when I took it upon myself. I quit the master bootmaking program with him and with Strolz, and started learning how to climb. I had a book of Freedom of the Hills Mountaineering. It's the Bible of mountaineering. It's published by the mountaineers. And I would how to rappel. And I go up on a cliff or go up on it, and I didn't manage not to kill myself. So I got my training right on the Alps, and took classes with the Austrian Mountain Club on glacier touring and all that, not speaking much German at the time. So I kind of took a sharp left-hand turn out of the corporate. I was headed towards a corporate ski business thing, and I'd been in a lot of different roles in the ski business, but that was early on. So I just took a sharp left and started guiding, and been happy. And then got into education kind of accidentally with Outward Bound. I thought, I'll do some guiding, and then I'll just try this Outward Bound thing, and got into that, and never looked back.
I would love to ask you about that, but what I should probably add is I'm not so sure how to describe it, because I don't want to alienate myself from the telemarketing community. But for 99% of people, telemarketing looks pretty obscure, right? I mean, it's sort of, I know a few friends who have tried it, and they've tried it for a season, and they've turned their backs going, man, it's crazy hard. It's just ridiculously hard. And so, but you've actually spent all your time and done all your travels and done all your ski tours and all your teaching and everything pretty much on telemarketing. So maybe you could give just us a quick 30-second thing about the difference between what most people might consider conventional skiing and telemarketing.
Well, when you start out, it's called connect the dots. It's called tumble marking. So you tumble down the hill. But I started out in Colorado in the 70s. I happened to be there. I had a cousin that was running Copper Mountain, Colorado, and they were they got us in some lessons early on with skis. So it's a hybrid between downhill skiing and cross country skiing. So your heels lift up, and it allows you to travel. It's slower than. There's also Alpine touring, which is your bindings locked down onto your heels and you can ski down. But the beauty of having your heels free, and now the equipment's quite good, is you're able to feel the mountain a bit more. And it is harder on your legs, but it keeps you honest.
And for a lot of people, it looks a little bit more unusual. It looks as though you were doing lunges all the way down the mountainside, right?
Yeah, some of these ski instructor training courses you have to do, especially if you're there's Alpine, which is the downhill with the locked heels. You do those weekend training courses for professional ski instructors of America. Pretty straightforward, it's not a lot of. But if you're doing a weekend of telemarketing and you're not, I kind of fake it. I kind of dip down a little bit, or I'll parallel a lot. But if you're doing a weekend of a telemark ski instructing class, then you're down you're kneeling, you're doing those lunges all weekend, and by the end of that,
So you're heading for the corporate world, well, the corporate life within the ski world. You went over and was training, apprenticing under a master bootmaker, but then the outside called you. You became taking your courses and maybe certifications, and then of course you transitioned into being an instructor for Outward Bound, right?
That's where but I had the seed planted, if I may. Two things really switched me. And one was my high school. I went to Proctor Academy, which is a prep school, and the headmaster had just finished an Outward Bound for Educators course. And that changed him. And he modeled the whole high school based on Outward Bound principles, experiential education. So I'm not absolutely sure, but I'm pretty sure it was one of the first high schools to use the challenge courses for their orientation and to take kids out for a week before the classes started. So that was my intro to experiential ed. I'd never heard of Outward Bound or anything. So that was a big change for me. And the other one was some expats I met in Portugal. I was doing my backpacking in Europe and traveling around before I started my work at Strolz in Austria. And I met these two people that were expats, and they fooled me thinking they looked Portuguese. And the guy says, I had my little backpack and I was 20 years old. And he invited me in. He says, "Come in, drink tea." And he had a beer and a potbelly and a hat. And he looked Portuguese. So he and his wife, she didn't say a word. They invited me in, had some tea, and sat down. And he said, "Where from, America? Where from?" I go, "Oh, I'm from near Boston. I'm near New Hampshire." "Oh, very nice." "I'm from the Bronx." There's this from New York. And he says, "Don't worry. I usually get most people take my picture, or take the picture with you." But he didn't. He says, so. But the long and short of it is, these two people, I stayed with them for a weekend, and they didn't tell me anything about what an expat was about or what it was to look back on America or the States. But they asked me lots of questions. This is way before internet. So we had a great weekend of just connecting about what it meant to be outside the U.S. and what is it. Where are you in your life, kind of thing. So they asked a lot of, and this continued with letters way before the internet. We wrote back and forth for years, and that left a huge impression on my value system. And then I got into Outward Bound.
So could you explain, what's the difference then between, say, going on an Outward Bound course or being taught by an Outward Bound instructor compared with maybe just taking a weekend mountaineering course or just going for a ski program? That there is quite a difference in the approach, isn't there?
Yeah, and the best way to the elevator speed, the best way to explain it is that it's not about getting to the top of the mountain. It's about communicating, getting there together as a whole team, so everyone feels included, and everything that goes along with that. M. Scott Peck wrote a book called A Different Drum, And I used his crib notes. I used some crib notes as my foundation for teaching at Outward Bound. It's basically a laboratory for personal disarmament.
Right.
That's a big thing. But people all come with different reasons for coming to a program like that. Where I did get bored with guiding, to be honest, because people would just show up and they just take another notch on their ice axe. Oh yeah, climb this mountain, climb that one. That got kind of old, so I went back to Outward Bound. So it's about building. The most important thing is compassion and kindness. Kurt Hahn, that founded it, is just, I think it's a rite of passage that everybody, not just kids, but all kids, but I think everybody should do a course or something. There's a lot of offshoots of that, of course. And that's the granddaddy of experiential ed. Yeah.
Wow, fantastic. And then did that lead you on to forming your own company, Mountain Spirit?
Well, it did
Did
rub
they have
off.
a similar ethos, or?
Yeah, definitely. I had a lot of time to learn how to play flute. I don't know if I do have some flutes here, but while I was waiting, so experiential education in the mountains means that you teach them, you let them try it out on the second, teach them the first week, let them try it out the second week, and the third week, let's see what you can do. So that means that you're following them and not giving them really any direction or too many instructions. They have to kind of fumble around the woods or hopefully use the compass properly and go down the right valley, you know. So when you're there mostly just to watch to make sure. So that's called the final expedition that last week. So I kind of lost my train of thought, but that is very different than guiding. Kind of what was your question?
Yeah. No. Well. How did you move from being an instructor with Outward Bound to forming Mountain Spirit with, I guess, a similar ethos?
So I did have a lot of time while I was waiting for these students to get over the next ridge or whatever, play my flute. I learned how to play flute really well, and the Native American flute. But just as importantly, while I was waiting for them, I had how can I improve on this? Because it was kind of hit or miss on the kind of group and the co-instructor I would have. Everything seemed to fit into place, except there was kind of a spiritual component that sometimes, and I was quite into Native American stuff at the time, or any kind of, and I use that, but Eckhart Tolle as well. But there was kind of hit or miss whether the group you could really soar with them and take off to other realms, so to speak. So I would take notes. I had a little notepad and I would stick it in my pocket. And I had at the end of, I don't know, 10 or 12, 15 years of working with Outward Bound, I had all these ideas, and it wasn't too hard to put all these I literally had little things that were stuck in my thing, and I had them all in a file, and I literally typed them all out, what came to be the mission for Mountain Spirit Institute in the States, which ran for, and it's still it's mothballed, but it's still active, as a nonprofit in the States. And our mission simply is to facilitate connection to yourself, each other, and nature or the environment.
And was it through there, Randall, that you managed, because I believe you've studied under a Native American elder, and you've been to Peru, maybe to a shaman there. I mean, you've had a few of these really amazing teachers, right?
Yeah, Sun Bear was an amazing teacher. And then it wasn't so much onboard teaching. I started meditating when I was a kid, and I started reading. I think I even have the book. It's right here. I read this when I was about 10. The Making of a Psychiatrist. I don't know why, but I was just kind of. It's funny. It's sitting right here. But I was really into psychology and meditation and self-hypnosis, probably starting at 10. So I had a history of that, and then being in the mountains with Outward Bound and just loving being out there was more about, it wasn't just about skiing or climbing, it was about the connection to so it's kind of taking that Outward Bound model and amping it up a little bit more. So not waving around white feathers or wearing white clothes, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but that wasn't my path. And as I get older, I don't really have an agenda. I just set the stage for people, if that makes sense. I definitely had an agenda before. We had a wonderful fellow named Gary Acevedo out of Salt Lake City that runs The Awakening, which it's called Rise Leadership, and I highly recommend it. He's a brilliant facilitator, and he does your avatar when you first arrive. He does a little bit of interview with you and find out what you're like, and you go into this month. It's a couple week program, or it could be, I can't remember how long it is, 4 or 5 days, whatever. He has different length programs, but one of the things he does is go around and kind of peg you. He kind of figures out what your avatar's like, or I might be using the wrong term because I've heard you use that, but and he would go around the room and say, what is your, says, Randall, this is what I want you to do in front of the rest of the group to introduce yourself to them. And I would go around and I would stand, I had to stand in front of each person in a circle. This is about 30 people. And I would have to go, hi, my name is Randall. I meditate in the mountains. Have you ever been in the mountains to meditate? So that was my baggage that I was arriving to this thing. And the idea was to break that up a bit and get, so that was a big eye opener for me that, I guess I did have an agenda, So now I'm just me, and it's like to help people get whatever form they are in, whatever happens, whether taking them sailing or whatever. But when it happens, what you're doing if you're doing it right, and you can see it in their eyes, whether it's here Mountain Spirit or Without We're Bound or the Mountain Spirit incarnation in the States too.
It's I recently was a guest on a podcast, and we were talking about my relationship to the outdoors, to the wild, and how it's changed sort of over the years. And it is just so fascinating, isn't it? Because I think with the advent of Red Bull and YouTube and all of that, there's a very alpha male or an alpha personality approach to outdoor pursuits, isn't there? Sort of fastest, most extreme, lightest, most bizarre, like the most dangerous, a new route, blah blah blah, and it was quite a process to go on to this podcast. They asked me to consider a lot of things, and it really made me aware that for me, that relationship with the wild has changed. And for me, going out into the hills and whatnot is as much an internal journey as an external one. And I can really sort of relate, Randall, about, as you know, like meditating, it can be sitting down, it can be walking, like walking meditation. It can just be going through the hills, and the perceived challenges can be within one's mind, as opposed to within the environment, right?
Yeah, perceived risk, which we did a lot with Without We're Bound, the perceived risk of what you're taking someone on a rock climb or a ridge walk, and you might be roped up, and you wouldn't want to fall, versus real risk. And a former Outward Bound colleague of mine has written some stuff about the real risk, the value of real risk. But I think just taking the time to be out there, and I've always dreamt of working with somebody and doing backcountry yoga. And this was back 30 years ago, before it's now. I think it is, people do offer that, of course. So I had that dream years ago to do that in the backcountry of Washington State, up at the North Cascades. So, my wife is she's a yin yoga teacher here, so we have ideas with Mountain Spirit here to do that earth connectedness, and with your body and yourself and each other. Yeah.
How did you come to go to New Zealand from Northeast US? That's quite a change.
Yeah, I met. I knew Hetty Beeler-Graf in New London, New Hampshire. She was a Swiss national champion, and she was really well known in Switzerland. She was like, you could go down the street and everyone would know who Hetty was. And she decided, but Andy, I decided after I was 30, I want to reinvent myself. So she went to New Hampshire and she and her husband started a ski school. So that was in the back of my mind about, don't be afraid to reinvent yourself a bit, just to take off. I was a bit of an expat, as I said, traveling, in this was a different step. This was definitely, but what brought me down here is my wife and the mountains, in that order. So, but we met through a mutual friend from Denmark, who I knew when I was mountain guiding in Peru. Her name was Lisbeth, and she introduced us. I called Lisbeth one day and said, "You got any friends?" I was kind of half joking. She was in Denmark. I was in Utah. "You got any friends?" She says, "Well, I do, but remember that person that we're going to go hiking in Peru, and I wanted you to meet her. I thought you guys would be great together, but I wasn't going to spill the beans. But now that you've asked, I wanted to wait until you guys got in person to meet. But now that you've asked, I think, well, give me your address. I'm not going to do that. I'll give her your address, and if she's interested, you'll hear from her. So a week later, I got an email, and Amanda was working for the Department of Conservation as a hut ranger here in New Zealand. So she had a couple of weeks up her sleeve and came up for we decided I was 15, she was 40. And we didn't want to waste any time. So we had a first date in Boston. She flew up for a first date. That's how I got down. And then I came down 3 months later with a ring.
So you got her while she was still suffering from the jet lag and the time zone change. So
I didn't propose until I came back.
Good timing, dude.
She was in her dock uniform, and she, drab gray and stuff with the patches and everything. And in the backcountry, and I proposed to her. Said, "Permission to marry, ma'am," kind of thing.
Fantastic. Well, which sort of leads me to sort of my final question, Randall. We'd all like, I'd love you to talk about just for a few minutes what you and Amanda have created, what you continue to create in your beautiful, beautiful property. And I think it'd be lovely to share what you've got going on there.
Thanks. Yeah, I think my that mission statement that I mentioned earlier on from Mountain Spirit Institute is my personal mission statement anyways. And I just, when I take, we do have the sailing business here on Lake Wanaka, Yacht Charters, which we're morphing. And I do want to mention that before we close too, what that morph looks like. But I will say, whatever activity that people do, I have a kind of a way of getting people connected to themselves, each other, and the environment. So, Amanda and I were looking around for property for quite a while. We were in Kingston, New Zealand, south of Queenstown, and we just kind of had the feelers out. We found this place, and we just knew it would work. Well, it took a bit of work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. There's been a lot of upgrade, but the person that we bought it from on East Side, I think we almost had an interview. She saw our website. She didn't want to just pass this on to anybody. And I think she knew that we would be good stewards of this place and that we had good motives. So the land is clearly powerful. There's a spire, a rock spire in the valley behind us that kind of watches over us. I'm sure that this was called the land of the Kahu, or the hawk. The Maori call it that. So it's quite a powerful spot. There's quite a bit of energy here. So we do use sage to smudge the house every so often. You can start feeling it just a bit intense up here. And we're surrounded by Mount Grandview. So we have the land letting it speak for itself. So when people come, again, if they're either coming as an Airbnb guest, or we're starting to do a lot more retreats where it's purpose-driven, people are coming with something in mind. And they stay for a week. And they either want to, we had a really cool guest and his wife stayed in the teepee. This is real interesting. I always find this quite an interesting contrast. They stayed in the teepee, and then he was recording on the Steinway in the music room. And so we get this kind of eclectic people that come and bring the guitars, or they just want to do yoga. We have a sweat lodge. So kind of and we put a rock face. We did some bolting on a small rock face behind the house, about a 10-minute walk up. So again, it's about experientially. My passion is couples work as well, and counseling. So I may go back and get a master's in counseling, but I feel like I've already done my master's informally with. I've seen just about everything come down the pike with Outward Bound and Mountain Spirit. So that's kind of what we let the land speak for itself,
Yeah. And then just finally, Randall, you always we've had lots of discussions, and I know it's a guiding light, being a heart-led business, and you're mentioning just earlier about how you feel that there's been a shift in local tourism as well, right?
Yeah. We had a lockdown here. How long was it, James? It was a month and a half.
Yeah, I think it was a month or something, or the shortest in the world, I think. But
Yeah, and if that doesn't wake you up,
Yeah.
in fact, I was just as I was writing this blog post on our blog, I happened to look at a pre-post or one I had written pre-COVID, and basically the title was Uber tourism. Queenstown's been named one of the trouble spots of Uber tour. What do we do now? That was the title of it. And then I wrote this one a couple nights ago, and I think it's a big wake-up call for everybody. I think there's a huge demand for counseling services for just recentering, no matter where you are in the world. I think it's just a reevaluation. We had 97% international tourism. So we've been forced to live our dream because we were kind of hooked on the Airbnb drug for a while. And it was easier to just keep doing that day to day. And then, oh yeah, we'll do our retreat center. But now we're kind of forcing ourselves to get the clients that is a better fit for us. And not to say that we didn't have great clients before, but people are coming for this. So. So that's kind of been the upside is that I haven't been out sailing much with clients. We've kind of mothballed the inspection for the boat with Maritime New Zealand for a little bit.
And I guess really for everyone involved with tourism the world over, it's just been a chance to step back, really to reevaluate one's values. And we've seen that in some businesses, and others have gone into hibernation, but others have reevaluated, haven't they?
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I think the time's come really, be it in tourism, be it in business, be it in finance, be it in coaching, be it in whatever it is, that there is a demand, there is a need for more human connection and more of a heartfelt connection, right?
Well, the downside was that we had no business, or not very little business. The upside is that we took a month off with our son, took him out of school and went on a road trip. So the local tourism board is kind of reevaluating as well. And they've just, I think you're at the right place at the right time. Timing is everything. Looking for this, that my last article on the blog was about timing is everything and looking for the signs. And I happen to feel that we've got what we have to offer here is just right for the right times right now. And there's a wonderful director of the tourism board and the staff at this local tourism board, and they're taking on the indigenous. He grew up on the North Island, in the north part of the North Island, so he grew up with Maori grandparents, basically. And he's got so much to offer about indigenous wisdom, and he's taking the tourism board in this direction, and everybody's on board. Fantastic. And it's just, sometimes I have to pinch myself. This guy's really approachable. And they gave a presentation the other day about heartfelt tourism, if you will, but it's about being responsible for the place, the people, the community that are here already, and the people that are going to visit. So I got a feeling it's going to be a model for other places, because we do not want to go back to what was, that was a train wreck we need to have, or it already was a train wreck, to be honest with you.
Hey, Randall, we're basically out of time. I always hand it over to Mike to pass a couple more thoughts and finish us off. But from my perspective, I so love our conversations, and today's been every bit as fun as all the others we have had. So thank you so much from my heart, Randall, and I'll pass it over to you, Mike.
Yeah, Randy. So we always ask this question with every guest. What parting words do you have for our listeners? Most of them are doing startups, or they're entrepreneurs, or they're people that are thinking about leaving their corporate cubicle farm and escaping. So what's the number one thing you tell folks?
Oh, I just keep remembering, I think it was Alexander Graham Bell, how many times it took him to try to invent the light bulb. And I think it was 138 tries. And if he had stopped at the 137th, we wouldn't have light, or somebody else would. So I think plugging away. And this is actually a funny little phrase, but it's actually been coming up lately on a couple of different fronts here, is that if you're not on the fringe, you're taking up room. And that was kind of a half joke, 20 years ago, but now it's actually kind of true. So I think I think if you can really, if you can explain your business model really well and people get it right away, then you might be behind the curve.
All right. Well, thank you very much for being here with us. Really appreciate it. Folks, there's going to be links down below where you can contact Randy. And of course, we highly recommend the trip to Wanaka, New Zealand. You can stop at James's house for a free beer before you go to Randy's retreat.